All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here today with Jeff Makjavich. It is August 6, 2026. We're at Le Cave Wine Bar in Portland. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here.
First question, as you probably know, is going to be why wine?
Totally. I did come prepared for this one. Ever since I, initially had my kind of aha moment with wine, it has been the one thing in my life that I haven't grown tired of and continue to, think about it and pursue it. I was a philosophy major in college, and I think the draw of wine has been that it's been the thing that, the more that I know, the more I realize I have no idea. Or just there's just so much to continue to learn. So it has always kind of satisfied that intellectual curiosity that I had, post my college career when studying philosophy was just this endless sort of pontificating and thinking about, metaphysical and all sorts of, deeper cosmic sort of things. Wine has kind of become that thing where I never grow tired of it. My fondest memories with the closest people that I love, center around food and wine, and that was something that I didn't really have growing up. I didn't have an appreciation for it, and it was kind of just early start of my restaurant career where I got the bug and there was no looking back, and it just became kind of an obsession of sorts, not in a overbearing way, but just I just really love this. And after you have a great wine and a great meal, I look forward to the next time I can have a great wine and a great meal. So it's always this kind of I'm a busy guy, so I don't necessarily have a lot of things to look forward to, but that next taste of wine with that next bite of food or whatever, or the company that I'm going to share that wine with has become the reason why I never grow tired of it.
So let's talk about life before wine. Tell us about where you were born and raised.
Yeah, so I was born in Modesto, California. My parents were all from California, but they moved up to Salem, Oregon when I was 1 year old. This would be 1992, I think. So I grew up in Salem, South Salem, so actually not all that far from certain vineyards. But my parents didn't drink, so I didn't really have any familiarity with wine or alcohol at large, in general. And they didn't really food wasn't ceremonious. They're not Epicureans by any stretch of the imagination. They were kind of food is sustenance, and that is what it's for. And so I think growing up, I was just kind of I was a good student living in Salem with virtually nothing to do. So I don't know, I was just head in the books, and I had friends, but I don't know, I wasn't like going to parties or anything. I was just kind of like cruising, ran cross country. And so I think I was like kind of used to being solo, you know, just on my own, like running, thinking about things, learning about, you know, the world through textbooks and whatnot. And I had friends and I hung out with them, but yeah, it was just kind of like, just kind of cruising through my adolescence. And so then I went to college up at University of Portland. That was 2009 when I started there. And I quickly discovered that partying was really fun. And I was like, I don't feel like people invited me to parties in high school. Were they happening? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think I was just kind of like a bookish kid and didn't really, I was just like ignorant of that. I didn't really like think about that going on, like, house parties, drinking, your parents' liquor cabinet when they go out of town. So that was just kind of like, that was not an experience that I had in high school. And then college, I was like, I didn't go crazy, but I was like, damn, this is way more fun than studying. And so then I was just kind of like, I was in an intro to philosophy course at the time, and we were studying like Descartes, and I was like, oh my God, I've lost sleep thinking about this stuff. Like this kind of ontological, like our existence, like what is it? Is it real? Is it fabrication? Like, I don't know. And so in that moment, I'm a very vibes-based guy, and I was like, I have no idea what I want to study. So I'm like, well, I kind of like this philosophy thing. And so I was just like, getting a lot of pressure from all sides to pick a major, so I guess I'll do philosophy. And I ended up like, it was very, very ambitious early on, because I think I was still holding on to that like high school kind of overachiever sort of thing. I did very well in high school. And so I was like philosophy major, English major, Spanish minor, psychology minor. I was doing it all. And then I would say like halfway through my college education, I was like, I'm gonna do one of these things, and it's the one that I'm furthest along, because I don't actually care that much about like becoming an academic. And so like, I think I was a little lost, but also just kind of going with the flow, which is what I tend to do. And so I would say like halfway through my college education, I started playing in a band. I was the like guitar player, like rhythm guitar player.
The band was called?
The Harm. The story behind that is our roommates were living with this guy. He's probably not going to hear this interview, and it's fine. It's not a problem. This guy named Andy Harm, and so we were kind of going through a construction where we were like, we have no idea what to name our band, so we were just like taking our friends' names and being like Andy and the Harms, or like Jacksons and the Martins, like just the stupid stuff like that. And so when we actually, because we were playing kind of like this like blues rock sort of like kind of garage sort of thing, very, very low key. Like, I'm not a good musician, and I'm not a good guitar player, but I love vibing out, I was just like, that Andy and the Harms is like a hilarious, he wasn't even in the band, but like, he was in, the namesake. And so then we were kind of like, well, if we drop Andy and we were just sort of like the Harms, that's kind of tough, that's kind of cool. And then we just dropped the S, and we were just like, we're the Harm. And I would not say that our music was like that hard-edged. Like, the Harm is a little, we were in it for the fun, and like, we actually got a pretty good following. We, I think, had such a good energy, and our live show was really fun because we all were having a really, really good time doing it. And so I was like huge into performance. Like, I love karaoke. I love getting like on a stage and like performing. And I loved it so much that I didn't think to do anything to set myself up to have a career. I was like, let's do this. The Harm, we're getting a record deal. We are touring. We are going to figure this out. Because like, we had a homegrown crowd, and like, we would play shows around town, not at any like of the like major venues. I remember like really networking hard, going to a lot of shows. I was going to Mississippi Studios, I was going to Doug Fir, I was going to Wonder. Like, I was meeting like talent buyers, and I was like, hey, you should check out the Harm. They're pretty good. And I'm in that band. And so I was like making a lot of friends in that community. So I feel like I was always kind of hustling and always kind of like networking, and also, but like more importantly, I felt like I was always trying to like foster community and like find my people. And for a while, like in college, it was that I was going to shows like 2 or 3 times a week. I was talking to anybody who was at those shows, whether they were the musicians who were performing or just the people who were in attendance of the show. I have a tendency again to like ride solo, so I was kind of like, I don't have anyone with me to entertain or mind, so I'm going to talk to this random guy that is also here, you know? And so yeah, that became weirdly my focus, while I still maintained pretty good grades. I still graduated with honors, despite being a huge procrastinator who saved every major paper till the morning of. You know, I had classic like ADHD, sort of undiagnosed, but like, you know, working well under pressure, doing my best thinking when I absolutely had to. And so I didn't necessarily like take the college career super seriously. In fact, I do want to say that like when we played shows, the best shows were always the house parties. And like we would play in a friend's basement and we would just turn it up and it would just be so fun. And I didn't get that same sort of pleasure from reading philosophy textbooks, you know? And so like I at a certain point was like, oh, I like to party. Like I like the social aspect. I like having fun. I like letting loose. And back then it was just like, you know, it was a lot of beer. I was never really a big liquor guy, but yeah, it was just, you know, cheap beer probably. And so, you know, I continued to go down that path. I was playing shows. I was going to shows. I was doing okay in school. And so when I graduated, I hadn't done any internships or anything. And so I was like, I spend enough time out and about in Portland to the point where like everybody is kind of looking familiar. I should also say that I did do some food service work in college. You know, I wasn't really all that interested in doing like something more internship-y, like career, I don't know, white collar for lack of better word. And so I was like, I always felt kind of like a, you know, total worker type. And I was like, you know what? One of my earliest jobs was working in Northwest at the defunct Kenny and Zook's Bagel Works, the offshoot of Kenny and Zook's Delicatessen. That was the coolest position because I was a dishwasher / barista and register person, which was hilarious because the dish pit was in the very back and the register was at the very front, along with the you know, the espresso machine. And so very often someone would walk in and it was all counter service. So I'd be like, oh, someone's up there. I got to take a break from my dishes and walk up and take an order, which is so crazy, like from a business flow perspective. And also just like, I've been spraying, like stuck on like a bagel starter off of these big baking pans and then making people coffee. It was a trip, but I really liked the people I worked with. It was a really fun, sort of like scrappy group of people. And so I had a little bit, like I had maybe a year and a half of like barista-ish work because I actually got trained by you know, a local roaster in town, which is no longer in business and operation, called Ristretto Roasters. And so after being out and about in Portland, I just started feeling like everyone looked familiar in a way that was like weird and like alienating. And I'm pretty good with names and pretty good with people's faces. And so like to be in this position where I was like, well, you know, my band is actually coming to an end. Like everybody's moving to different parts of the country. It wasn't meant to be. We didn't get that record deal. I didn't really seek it out, but maybe sent a demo tape, sent our like, you know, our one EP to a couple labels that signed the bands that we were ripping off. So I was like, maybe there's a chance, you know, they like that sound. So, you know, maybe we'll strike gold here. So I just like, I got it in my head that I just wanted to move anywhere else. And I took a spring break trip down to Austin, Texas to go to some South by Southwest shows. I had never been, heard lots about it. I don't know if you've ever been, but it is a trip, and it is, we'll fast forward or foreshadow a little bit. Having lived there, it's a crazy time. It's a crazy time for the city. And like, I don't know what it's like now in like the post-pandemic era, but it got really, really big, it got really tech oriented, and it got really expensive, and everything was like, it became sort of pay to play. And so even going to like, you know, certain band showcases or venue showcases, it was like you either had to wait hours in line or you had to pay like $1,000 to get a pass, you know. So I didn't end up actually participating much in that South by Southwest, but I did end up really, really falling in love with my time there, and it became a very, very short-listed thing of like places that I could potentially see myself moving. And you know, I think at the time I was like, oh, music's so important to me, and it's like the live music capital of the world. I'm gonna move down there and I'm gonna find a new band. And then like I moved down there and I was like, I don't need to do that, you know, like, you know, leave that chapter behind me. And so I moved to Austin, and I moved to Austin with a fresh Bachelor of Arts and no work experience. And at the time, like, I think like startup culture was really, really huge down there. And so I was like, I'm gonna get into marketing. I'm gonna get into like copywriting without any real tangible sort of work experience. And so I applied to like 50 different places, didn't hear back from like, I heard back from one. And I had an interview and I thought it went great. And then I was like, I didn't make it to the next interview and I was crushed. So I was like, I have no direction. I have no idea what to do. So I did end up like taking an unpaid internship, which was like, felt a little too little too late. I was like uprooted. I had no community. Moved in with my girlfriend at the time. I was like, I guess I'll take this unpaid internship and hope that I can like grind out a job out of it. It was for a hunting and fishing online editorial. Neither activity I've ever done. And it was like the kind of like the BuzzFeed. It was trying to be like the BuzzFeed of like hunting and fishing. And having not ever done either activity, I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna create some content. And I remember my like first article that I posted was just like dogs dressed up as like other animals because it was like around Halloween time. And I was like, I kind of got a lot of engagement on that post. And so I was like, guys, I'm bringing in clicks, I'm bringing in views. Like, when do you think that I can actually, you know, get paid? Had a like meeting, like a coffee meeting with like my editor that I was reporting to. Mind you, I worked there for a week. And on like the Friday, I was like, so what's the deal? And he was like, CEO wants to keep you on for like 3 more weeks unpaid, and then you'll get paid $10 an hour. And I was like, I quit. I am not doing that. I don't philosophically love the idea of hunting and fishing. Like from a, you know, soulful standpoint, as like far as like connectedness to the earth and respect for the environment, of course. I hadn't done any of that. So it was like, I'm not gonna hack it for 3 more months without pay to only get $10 an hour. Like, that's the thing to look forward to. Forget it. And so then I quit, and I was like, I'm at a crossroads. Like, I don't think I'm gonna like find a niche to like use my college degree. I think I'm gonna have to like go back to square one. And so the work experience that I drew upon was the fact that I had some barista experience and some food service experience. My first job in Austin was at a restaurant called Your Mom's Burger Bar. And every burger, there was like 10 to 15, maybe even 10 to 20 different burgers that were all named after like different musicians. And I don't know if I ever thought that was cool because I was like, well, I like music and I like these rock stars or whatever. I don't think so. I was like, Your Mom's Burger Bar. I'm embarrassed to say it. Like, my job is the most embarrassing job I could possibly have. I was making $2.13 an hour, but I was getting tips. I was not very good. Like, I'm still, like I said, you know, that I procrastinated a lot before college. It was definitely like, I would forget people were there. Like, I was not a good server. at the start, but it was also like a place that I worked for like a couple months, and then on the day that they like ran out of burger buns, and I tried to get a hold of the owner to be like, hey, we're out of burger buns, and I couldn't get a hold of him. I was like, I don't think this is going to work out. I still have some integrity and still some pride. So I quit that job and was like, okay, maybe serving isn't for me. And so then I found a barista job, and it was a barista job that was like this small cafe that was like a window. It was like a coffee window attached to a big garden nursery that was across the street from a university down there. It wasn't University of Texas, but it was this small Catholic school called St. Edward's, I believe. And I would occasionally just make coffee for the staff of the garden nursery. Like, it was so slow. I started in the winter time. But I was like, it was one of those, like, I was only ever working solo. There's a coffee machine, there was like a smoothie station, there was a panini press, there was a salad, there was like, and then I would take the orders. And so there's probably other job aspects of that I've forgotten at this point. And there was also no organizational flow. So if you got like a party of 4 coming in and ordering smoothies, sandwiches, and coffee, I was fucked. Like, it was like I was gonna be there for a long time, and I was going to be moving in a very strange figure 8 to make that all happen. But luckily it didn't happen all that often. It was just not a business that was like set up for success, but somehow they made it work. But I had a lot of time to myself, like hours of time, where I would often not be talking to anybody. And so I got like the blue bottle book of like coffee and espresso, and I read that like cover to cover, and I was just like back there like doing reps, like learning how to make coffee and like learning how to pull good shots, learning how to steam milk, do latte art. I was like, I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna be a barista. And I can't exactly remember how I got connected with someone. I think it was through a mutual friend in Portland who had a friend in Austin who maybe lived up here or was from here originally, but this gal worked at a coffee shop that was like kind of in my neighborhood. And I met up with her, and I was like, if ever there's an opportunity that opens up at this place called Thunderbird Coffee, let me know, and I would love to throw my hat in the ring. I would love to interview. Some time passed, and an opportunity did come in, and I went in and I crushed it, and I got hired there. And that was like really the first time where I started feeling like I had a community. There were two locations, and everybody worked at both of them. So there was like a nice cross-pollination there where I felt like it was a staff of maybe like 12 or so, 2 people working at a time, and it was a pretty high volume spot. And so not only did I have like really cool coworkers that I like started to like really become friends with, I also met a lot of cool regulars, and there were a ton of regulars in the restaurant and bar scene. And Austin at the time was like, this was back in 2014. It was still kind of like pre-tech boom. Even halfway through my time in Austin, it really felt like it became Silicon Valley #2, and like a lot of big corporations were moving there because like Texas was really relaxed on corporate taxes, and so like corporations could really make a killing. And so the town really grew in a way that ultimately I didn't end up liking very much. But in that heyday of my like first 2 years out of the 4 that I lived in Austin, like Thunderbird was like where it all started for me. I got connected into the industry. I was going to like bars, I was going to restaurants. There was a huge gift culture in Austin where it was like you had a buddy or you knew someone who came in, like you hooked them up, and that was awesome. Like going to a restaurant with like my partner and like getting showered with gifts because I like gave them free coffee, like was so cool, and really made me feel like really connected and loved in a way, and that I finally belonged to a community. And I loved that job. Like, that was one of my favorite jobs, like, ever. The people I worked with were so cool. It was so fun. It was so busy. It was just rocking. And like, we would put on whatever music we wanted, and we would just have so much fun. And eventually, like, I started, while working as a barista, starting to get into food. Yeah, I hadn't ever made a dinner reservation in my life, and eventually loved the ceremony of a nice meal, you know? And wine hadn't come along yet for me, but like the thoughtful presentation of food was something that I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, I like this. So then I was working as a barista, but I was starting to get into food. I was going to restaurants more. I was starting to learn how to cook, which is something that I never really did. That kind of inspired me to start to think about working in a restaurant again. Your Mom's Burger Bar, I was like, I don't think this is not normal. This is not what they're all like. And so I ended up interviewing at this spot called Uchi, which is like a pretty famous sushi spot in Austin, that was kind of like the restaurant that I think kind of started the fine dining movement in Austin, which had also been kind of very casual like Portland is. And that was the first reservation I ever made. And it was for, you know, like a 6-month date anniversary. And I was like blown away by like the hospitality experience, because like, yes, I had worked in food before, but it was counter service. There wasn't the ceremony. It was like, again, kind of felt like an extension of how I'd always viewed food, which was like, you need to eat. And like, it should taste good. That's great. Like, that's a step in the right direction. But like, just being like, tossing a dish up at like the window and being like, Steve, I got your food. Like, this is not like the experience I started having once I started going to restaurants that were like full service. So I interviewed at Uchi because that was the place that like really opened up my eyes to what food could be and what thoughtful presentation of food could be, and the hospitality experience. And it was a really rigorous interview process. I had never had anything like that before. There was like 3 rounds. First interview was at like the original Uchi location in front of like every manager in the whole company. The second one was at their like sister restaurant, which was like closer to where I lived, called Uchi Co. And that was more like one-on-one interviews, but like a bunch of them with various managers. And then there was a third one that, yeah, I'm blanking on what the format was, but ultimately I think they hired, I believe that I was like, it was down to like me and one other person. And considering that I had like no restaurant experience and no Japanese like experience at all, didn't know the language, didn't really know anything about sushi, even from like a hobbyist perspective, or sake, like I didn't really know much at all. The fact that I made it that far was like super cool. Like I wasn't like hurt that I didn't get the job. I was like, yeah, this person like knew more than me and she seems cool. So like no hard feelings. But they extended an offer for me to work at their like casual pizza spot that they had just opened maybe a year prior to me interviewing. It's a spot called St. Philip that was in Sunset Valley, which was like pretty deep South Austin, and I was living in Central Austin in a neighborhood called Hyde Park. That spot was a grind, but it provided the best training I had ever received and have ever received since. They took it incredibly seriously. So even though it was like the casual sister restaurant to like fine dining Uchi, all of the tenets of their hospitality were like steps of service, are fine dining. You can be a little more casual, like we had, you know, a uniform and it was like gingham, like button downs, you know, but like the steps of service were very, very intentional. The training program was like a month long. We weren't able to like finish our training module until we could recite every ingredient in every dish. And granted, it was pizza and like salads and like small plates, so there was only like maybe 10 ingredients in each, but we were all responsible for having like great product knowledge. Nowhere else since then has ever like quizzed me as like a requisite for actually working. And I want to shout out a guy who, I don't know if he's still with the company, but his name is Zach Knight. He was their training manager for the whole company. That guy was amazing. And like the most enthusiastic like hospitality guy ever. Like he got you excited about taking care of people. And he was just like someone who I really looked up to at the time and continued to like think like his experience with me like got into my DNA, where he was such an affirmative person, but he was also like, he had standards and he was very direct and he made everything really clear. And so I just remember him being like, yep, you're gonna polish the water glasses because if there's water on these glasses, that's like worse than blood. And he was just like, he would show you how to like carry 3 dishes or whatever and how to like serve them with like open arm service. And I just remember like all of us who were training to be like serving assistants. Like I wasn't even like jumping into like serving. Like we had a period where we were like back serving, you know, and this was like a very casual spot, but it was still like almost like a captain system in a way. Mm-hmm. And I just remember like picking up dishes and like running them, and he was like, Jeff, you're natural. And it was just like that sort of like exuberance and like you always knew where you stood, but he was so fair and he was so like kind. I love that guy. That has been like a touchstone for sure for like how I've become like a manager. At least I like really try to be that. And that training experience was like something that I would love or have loved in all of my management experience to carry with me and like imbue. And oftentimes I haven't really, unfortunately, had the time or like the resources. Austin, like, yeah, servers make like $2.13 an hour. So like labor cost is actually pretty low. Here as a manager, I've been kind of like, I need to hire pretty quickly and I need to get people like going. So I haven't been able to like take the time to like really do that sort of like level of training, which I think is kind of endemic of the Portland restaurant scene and probably the kind of global, or at least the national scene. But anyway, we can talk about that in a different context, I'm sure. So that job was like, first of all, I didn't have a car. Like I didn't have a car in Austin for like most of my career, or most of my time there. And when I did finally get a car, it got totaled, parked outside of my house after I'd only had it for like a week. And luckily like their insurance like paid it out and all that stuff. But it was like, I guess I'm not supposed to have a car. And so I was busing down there, and like every server worked like lunch and dinner service. And so I felt like I was in the war. Like I could have sworn that I worked there for a year. I worked there for 2 months, like maybe 3. But it was just like 5 days a week, like 2 services. I was definitely clocking in like at least 60 hours, and then like was not getting home until very, very late. And it was so brutal. And so I ended up quitting that job. But okay, so like going back, when I was had given my notice and was still working at Thunderbird, I had like a regular come in, and I was like, this is my last shift. Like, I'm going out to like work in a restaurant. It's called St. Philip, but I'm sure I'll see you at your spot, whoever it was, and wherever they worked. And the guy behind him in line was like, I heard you're going to work at a restaurant. You're going to work at St. Philip, and I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, I was the director of operations for the Uchi group for a long time, and like, you've always taken really good care of me here. If St. Philip doesn't end up working out, I'm the director of operations for the spot called Contigo, which has a sister restaurant called Gardner. We'll get to that later, or we can get into it right now. I hated St. Philip as far as like just the logistics of it, and also it was a huge restaurant, and like there was so much staffing, so I didn't actually make that much money for how much time I was spending there. And also, like, overtime didn't matter. Time and a half for $2.13 an hour is like $3.30. Like, so I was like, I'm not making any headway here. So I reached out to this guy, Andy Erdman, and was like, hey, I gave my notice at St. Philip, and I'm wondering if there's still an opportunity. Or I was smarter than that. I probably reached out to him before putting in my notice, because I think I put in like a month's notice too. I had to have been there for like 3 months, but it didn't feel, looking back, it was like a very short time that felt like an immensely long time. I reached out to Andy, and he was like, come by, meet the general manager, this guy named Roberto. And so I did. I went in to eat, and Andy was super nice. He was like, come in, eat the food, and like, see if you like it, which I thought was cool. And Gardner was nice. That was their, like, Noma was really big at the time, and they were going for this like kind of austere Scandinavian fine dining, super like seasonal driven, like haute cuisine, very fine dining. And I was very impressed by it. I was very intimidated by it, but I was like, this spot is cool. Like, they're doing stuff that I have not ever seen before. And like, somebody thinks that I could do it. I'll give it a shot. So I started working there as just a back server. And we would do like these like wine blind tastings, or maybe not even a blind tasting. We would do these like wine trainings in our like pre-shift. And I remember, and this is absolutely not a knock, everybody was actually very cool that I worked with, but they were very knowledgeable, and I didn't know anything, and I was very intimidated by it. And I recall this one time that we were tasting a Sancerre. I remember that it was Vacheron. I remember the exact wine that it was. And the general manager was like, what do y'all smell? What do y'all taste? And I like said something, and he was like, no. And I was just like, this isn't for me. Like, I guess I don't get it. I guess I'm not good enough. And because that was such like an austere sort of like service environment, and it was very much like, you know, we had aprons, it was very like everything was ironed and very formal, and we would pour with hands behind our back, and the guests were wearing suits. Like, I was just kind of like, I attributed that culture to wine, even though I think Roberto did a fantastic job to be like, wine makes food taste better, and like, it should be the part of everyone's experience here. We had a bar program, but it was not super robust. I think most people did order wine, and the ethos was really good. Like, he definitely was like, do not upsell wine. Like, wine shouldn't be a luxury. It should be like a crucial component of each meal. But I couldn't really believe it. I didn't believe it at the time because people were coming in, they were dressed up in suits. I wasn't confident about talking about any of the wines. I wasn't a server yet, and I kind of like recused myself from even serving because I was kind of like, I don't think this is for me. And around that time I was kind of like, you know, I'm comfortable with coffee. Maybe I'll go back to like being a barista. And so I did split some time between like working at the cafe that was literally next door to Gardner and also working at Gardner as a back server. I kind of dialed in Gardner's coffee program, and we did all like French presses, and I was really proud of like what I contributed to that restaurant in my own little way. But I was just kind of like, I don't think I'll ever be confident in talking about wine. Everyone else is so far advanced, so much more advanced than I am, and so I was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. But then, you know, I was around it enough and really enjoying hospitality, and I kind of like somewhere along the way was like, you know what, I need to get over this, like, I need to get over this hump. I need to get over this I need to get out of my comfort zone and like be okay with like being wrong or learning about something that I feel like I'm starting from scratch. And I remember even talking to like some of my coworkers, and I was like, I don't think I'll ever learn. And they were like, that is stupid. You can start now. Like there's no timeline. Like, yes, we've been working in wine longer, but like that doesn't mean that you can't learn. And so I was like, okay, I think the best way for me to like set myself up for this job, and like I think I was like, I like hospitality and I want a career in it, and if I don't learn about wine, I'm really limited about where I can go and what I can do. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna like fucking make it happen. I'm gonna make it happen. And so I recall reaching out to Roberto, and I was like, I'm gonna come in to eat. I wanna bring in a bottle that I know is on the list, but I don't wanna order it from the list, like, just because like there was weird sort of like corkage laws in Texas, and so I was kind of like asking permission, like, can I bring this wine? I found it, you know, retail. I don't want to cut into your inventory. I don't want to like do anything weird. Like, can I just bring the bottle and enjoy it? I remember it was a Chenin Blanc. It's from Brock Cellars, like California Chenin, which is like, it's so funny that it was like, that ended up being like my aha wine. But I remember like ordering the dishes that I was curious about, and having this bottle, and like, I don't remember everything we ordered, but I remember the one dish that was like square in the middle. It was either the entree or it was like, the pasta course before an entree. And like Gardner was cool. It was like, we are like vegetable forward with using like meat as a condiment rather than like the focus, you know, which was radical for Texas, home of barbecue, you know. And so I remember having like the Chenin open, and it was like, I think those wines used to be really quite good. I haven't had them in many years, but remember just like being like, this just kind of tastes like acid, and maybe there's like some minerality, you know, like I'm learning how to evaluate wine. And it was like, this is good, this is fine, but it's not really giving me very much. And then the dish that we got was like this spring vegetable risotto. The rice was cooked in this like Parmesan broth, and it was garnished with like snap peas and like nettles or like fiddlehead ferns, like just like all of these like spring in a bowl. And the moment I had a bite of that food with that wine, the wine exploded. And there was so much aromatics to it. There was so much fruit. There was so much generosity. It wasn't just like the acidic mineral thing that I had been tasting up until that point. Part of it maybe was like the wine needed to open up, but also like I think that wine needed food, and it needed the right food. And so in that moment, everything changed. That is the moment that I'm thinking about when you ask me why wine. That I was like, holy fucking shit. Like, this is what people talk about? This is what food and wine pairing is? I had always thought it was like something totally different, where it was like, I don't know, like the wine made food taste better. Like I was thinking about it like omnidirectionally. And then that was the moment where I was like, no, everything makes everything taste better. The food is making the wine taste better. And I was like, I've been missing out on this for was 25 years of my life, maybe not that, 24 years. And that was the moment that I was like, oh, I am going to be chasing this high from here to eternity. And that was when I was like, Roberto, put me in. I want to be a server. I want to facilitate this experience for people. And so then, without any practical knowledge whatsoever, I was like, I think this wine would be good with this dish. And then I was like, can I bring my friends a splash of this wine with this dish? I think it's going to pair well. And I was probably really annoying. But I was like, I'm super excited now. Like, I really want to figure out how food pairs with wine and vice versa. I was like, oh my God, new reason for living, new lease on life. Nevertheless, I still was like, I never graduated from being like a brunch server there, and I actually didn't work at Gardner for that much longer. They ended up they weren't very busy because it was like a restaurant that didn't have that much demand, and we were like a Bon Appetit, top 50 best new restaurants, but then we'd the day that was announced, we had 2 covers in the dining room. And so it was just it was very clear that it was this is not the right restaurant for Austin. And fine dining was just not really doing well unless it was something that was really familiar. Steakhouses were still obviously doing well. Uchi was doing really, really well. Sushi being something that's fairly easy for people to understand. But Gardner was just not. So they had made the decision to reopen under a more casual concept, and they were like, we think you'd be great at the casual concept. But at that time, I had started really enjoying the people that I worked with and stopped seeing them as being they were real professional, and I think that really maybe kind of intimidated me at first. But then they also liked to party, and they also had a lot of fun. And so I remember going to this restaurant that was maybe 6 blocks from Gardner called Bufalina, which was a Neapolitan pizza spot that had the best wine list in Texas at the time, bar none. Certainly there was no spot in Austin, and maybe there would be a spot in Houston that had a really great classic wine list, but their thing was French natural wine and iconic Burgundy, Rhone, Piemonte, almost blue chip producers. And so there was so much wine that was just so food friendly, and then there were some of the best wines in the world that were so excessively priced. So it was just it was very clear that the spot was started by someone who had a little bit of money, wasn't in the industry necessarily, but had a deep appreciation for fine wine. And that spot was the coolest spot that I had ever been in my life. They were bumping, I remember one of the first times that I went there, them playing SOS band, Do It Right, so loud, while the most immaculate wood-fired pizza is coming out. We're hitting the table, and everyone had a bottle of wine on the table, and it was just another kind of aha moment where I was oh, wine's sick. People wine is cool, and food is what I really appreciated, and why I think Bufalina was the spot that really made it happen for me, was that the food was really simple. It was really super farm to table, but not preachy about it. It was pizza. Everybody understands pizza. It was pizza with 4 ingredients tops, and it was just so good. The dough was made in house. They had their own mozzarella and burrata. They handmade the burrata fresh daily, mozzarella too, which would go onto the pizzas, and it would also be used in these ever changing seasonal sets based on what they got in house. And so I think that because the pizza was so easy to understand, and the salads and all that stuff, it was definitely rooted in Italian ethos. that allowed a lot of bandwidth to get like freaky with the wine. And so my biggest struggle and like my biggest hurdle, I think, with like Gardner never feeling like comfortable was like the food was pretty complex. And then the wine was like kind of tough to decipher too. And so I just kind of felt like ill-equipped. But when I went to Bufalino with all my friends from Gardner, and we had several bottles of wine and a bunch of good food, where I was still having that sort of like seamlessness experience with the food and the wine, where it's like, I don't know where the wine ends and the food begins, and fuck, I don't know where I end and the wine begins. Like, it feels like an extension of me now. And it just, that was the second time it really clicked for me, that it was like, wine isn't just about the food and the wine, it's also about the environment and like enjoying it with people that you really, really care about. And so that was like oh no, I want to work here. This is where I want to go. And I had like at a concert, like met another like friend of a friend. I've gotten every job, or like every job opportunity has almost come from just like me mutually meeting a friend by just being out in the world and being open. And so I met someone who was working at their second location that they had just like recently opened. And I think at the time I lived there. I lived in that neighborhood. And so this person was like, I'm dropping all of my shifts at this location to go back to the original location, which is the one that I did fall in love with. Sorry, I touched the mic. And so I got an interview and they were like, did you serve at Gardner? And I was like, absolutely. Like, I lied, you know, like I fake it until you make it. And so I was like, oh yeah, that was serving. That was really good too. And not coming forward with the fact that I just was like, I was there all the time, but I was just like running dishes, presenting, nailing steps of service, but like I wasn't really like table side. And I had ended up working at St. Philip when I passed the like serving assistant sort of part of my career. I had experience waiting tables, and I found that I was actually pretty good at it. Or at least I thought at the time. We'll get to that. So I was able to get an in at Bufalina, and I think I maybe staged and it went well, and I got the job, and I became kind of like the de facto like wine nerd of that location. Everyone else was like maybe more experienced from a wine or from a restaurant perspective, but I was the one who was like, oh, I really like wine. I'm gonna like carve out my niche here. Like, I'm gonna be good at this because this is everything I can understand. And so that's when I really started proliferating and feeling like I was learning really fast about wine. And a lot of it was like, I was also kind of bullshitting and thinking that I knew stuff that I didn't. And like, I look back on previous conversations and I'm like, I probably couldn't have been more wrong about that, but I did sell it and the people liked it. And so that was like the time where I also like started, it was a cool setup. Like, it was a smallish restaurant. It was like, there was a bunch of two tops that were all banquet seating. And then there was like picnic tables in the center. And then there was another like service bar, but we didn't do cocktails. It was all wine. And so like we rotated sections, and like I found that like the service bar was really, really fun because it was like the food was not expensive and the wine was really accessibly priced. I would get a lot of neighborhood regulars, and then like I just through enthusiasm got a lot of those regulars coming back, and it got to the point where they were like, pick whatever you're like stoked on. And that became like a very important moment for me in my wine career. And so then I continued to put some time in, and I worked there for like maybe a year and a half before deciding to move back to Oregon. I think this was when like I was starting to get kind of priced out of where I was living. It got really techie, got less cool. I was enjoying it less. I almost took a job in Waco, Texas, and then was like, why would I do that? I could go back to Portland where like someone who was working there when I first worked at Bufalina, this is Bufalina Due, she was like the original manager that I worked with. She ended up moving up here and working in restaurants. She was serving with, her and her husband both got into hospitality up here, and they were making a lot of money, and life seemed a lot easier for them. And I was like, why am I hacking it? Like, I like Portland. Now I've like amassed some experience, and I think now is like the time to maybe move back. I'm really passionate about wine. I want to be somewhere that I could maybe learn how to make wine. And so that was originally the plan. I like had a plan to like move up here and work a harvest. I moved up here in I moved back here in September of 2017, and had a tentative plan to work harvest with, I want to say his name's Matt Burson from Love and Squalor. I've never actually met him. I didn't end up doing it because like the move ended up costing me like thousands of dollars. It was a really hectic kind of everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And then again, it was like, at the time I feel like it was like $10 an hour to do like harvest internship. And I was like, I can't do that. I've got to get a job. I had a really hard time finding a job. It seemed that my Austin work experience, even though I had a little bit of Portland experience on my resume, was not enough to get an in anywhere. But I was lucky that a friend of mine who I had worked with at Gardner, who had moved up here in like 2015 and had started working as a prep cook at Le Pigeon, let me know after I'd been back for like almost a month without a job, that he was working at Little Bird at the time, Little Bird Bistro, which is now closed, but was doing really, really well in like a pretty popular spot back in fall of 2017. He let me know that a server had put in his notice, and so I was like, I will be right down there. And I went down with a resume. I met the general manager, this gal named Kristen, or I guess she was the director of operations, and I met the general manager for a formal interview. But she was like, we had a good conversation, so she invited me back for a formal interview, and met with the GM, Brian, Adams Hartford, I believe, and got a stage, came in to my stage, and I remember just kind of like floating through it. Like I think in previous like stages, I'd maybe like taken a more hands-on approach, but this was like really the kind of time where it felt like they were like, you haven't been trained yet. Like, don't do anything. What are you, like, sit and observe, or don't sit. But like, I followed along with like 3 different people. They were all cool. I think I asked like good questions. It was cool. The 3 people were like this gal who became a good friend of mine named Amanda, Kate Anderegg, who works at Division Wines, but works at Petit Monde, and I think was the Petit Monde rep at the time for Little Bird, and Sergio Lucia. So it was like 3 people who have become like really important to me in some shape or form. I ended up getting that job, and I was really fucking bad at it. Like, I was not prepared. That restaurant was really hard. I've been like trying to remember from memory how many seats that restaurant had, but it was at least like, I would say it was probably like 60 seats, 3 servers, a food runner who was kind of like when they run a dish, they try to do like 10 different things when they're out on the floor. And it was a rotating, like we all did all of those tasks. And I just remember being like, there is so much to think about, and there are so many steps of service. The sections are pretty large, and the style of service is much more formal than I'm accustomed to. because even if I was serving at Gardner with like that higher level of service, like they were not doing the covers that Little Bird was doing. So it was a fucking beast. And I also like was not super rooted in like the French classics. I would say that like wine to me, I was still like, I was into natural wine. And like, I remember also like at the time that I interviewed at Little Bird, I also interviewed at Olympia Provisions Northwest location. And I remember going to that interview and like looking at their wine wall, and I was like, I know these producers, like this is very like Bufalina coded. Then I went to Little Bird and it was like, oh no, like, and like all those wines are like pretty classic, you know, they were all super classic. And like, I think that was like a really important thing for me. And the fact that I didn't know a lot of those like classic producers from those classic French regions was like, I want to work here. Like, I think I had gotten to a point where like Olympia Provision seemed like the easy choice or like the safe choice. Little Bird seemed like this is going to stretch me. And that felt important because I'm a very like motivated career person. And if I'm going to do anything, I want to be doing it with intention and to the best of my ability. So I remember just being like really not good at that job, like really not good. Like Brian pulling me aside and being like, do you want to do this? Like, because I would be messing up kitchen chits. I would be like forgetting to ring stuff in. I would be like ringing the wrong thing in. And like, just, that was kind of like, it was such a well-oiled machine that mistakes like that were like, this is ruining service. And I was like, had a come to Jesus moment that I was like, I do want to be here. Even though like, I feel like shit now and I feel like I suck at this job. It was super, super humbling, but I like made that conscious decision to like go for it and not quit when it got hard. And I think I would quit very casually on a lot of stuff like music, you know, like when I was like, I don't really have guys that I play guitar with anymore that I really enjoy spending time with. So I'm staring down the barrel of actually learning how to be a good musician. And I'm like, we're good, move on. So I felt like in that moment, I was like, no, like, I know that this is what I want to do. I really want to be in wine, and I really want to be in hospitality. And once I started getting like better at service, just the mechanics of like getting shit right, Sergio was an amazing mentor to me. And really started like rounding out my education. Like wine was like a huge thing in like our pre-shifts. We tasted like new stuff every day. I think every Sunday he would do like a Psalm Sunday. And I think I worked Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday there. And every like Sunday we would have like a special something off the bottle list, and there would be like some prize for like who could sell the most of that glass. And usually like the prize was like a nice wine book. And I just felt like everything about what he did there was like so important to me, and like kind of like teaching me in a way that like was really conducive to my style of learning. Like I said, I did well in school, but I was always kind of restless. And so like, I've not been one for like really taking like the studious route. Like I did my quartermaster sommelier level 1 and was like, okay, I spent $800 out of pocket to get a piece of paper that said I know something about wine, to then go back to the job where I was making $213 an hour. And I was like, I don't feel like this is the right approach. I think like my style of learning is very much like off the cuff, on the job, in the moment. And I just recall like several times like Sergio, like it would be like him and he was like the manager on duty. I would be like the one server, and we were doing happy hour, and it was like chill. And he'd be like, you know, like I'm talking about Domaine Tempier, like Bandol Rosé, and I'd be like, oh, I never had it. And he was like, you've never had that? I'm gonna go open it. And like, he would buy the bottle and we would like open it and he would pour it for me and we would share it. And like, he would talk about it. He'd be like, what do you think? Like, what do you smell? Like, what does it taste like to you? And I remember, super funny, the day that he did that, there was like I think maybe it was like the Master Sommelier exam was going on in Portland at the time. So that guy, D. Lynn Proctor, who was like in the original Somm movie and probably all of them, it's been a while, he was sitting at the bar. And I remember being like, this Tempier tastes like salted cucumbers. And he was like, D. Lynn was like, yeah. And I was like, I've made it, guys. And like, I don't really care that much about like, you know, Master Sommelier culture. Like, that's not really something that I like necessarily value, but I was always like kind of insecure about my like wine experience. And so for that moment, it just felt super validating. And again, like just finding that like sort of community of being like, you know, I can do this. I like it. Other people like it. Maybe that's all there is to it. And so I think I learned so much about wine and like getting my roots in like the classics of like French regions, variety, typicity, that formed such a strong foundation for me to then move from that job into this job, which is how I originally found myself here. Back in, this would have been like, I think I interviewed like the end of 2019, and really it came out of like a kind of connection to someone, I think it was like through Sergio. I was kind of like taking on, I was really getting my hands dirty, and I was like, Sergio, I want to be your guy that like, when you can't be there to like receive wine, like I want to meet the reps. I want to taste with the reps. That was part of it. I want to receive deliveries. So I'm meeting like the delivery drivers and like learning to like store wine and find the organizational systems and learn all of that. I think that was like also just super crucial to my experience. It wasn't just like Sergio opening bottles and talking about them and like tasting them together. It was really like, if you want to do this, like, I'm going to put you in every aspect of the job, which is like putting your hands on every bottle that comes in. And that was also like something that I really, really appreciated about him. Like, I really did feel like I was like the assistant wine director, you know, and I got really good at selling wine to tables. And like, I became really good at like, and what was such a fun experience of the job, which I will say that I miss, being a spot that doesn't really serve much food, is like when I really understood the food, I really understood the wine list, and I would get like 4 top of people and they were like, we're ordering all of these dishes. And I would be like, I think these bottles are gonna go really well with that. Like based on what you like, based on what you ordered, based on just how everything is gonna flow. And that was so much fun. And so like, I loved Little Bird, even though I got kind of like maybe burnt out a little bit because it was a really, really hard job. It was the job that shaped me into the like restaurant professional that I am. And I have nothing but like thanks for both Sergio and Andy Fortgang, who I knew, like I would say I knew less at the time. I was working with Sergio more, but I always had like a really good relationship with Andy too. And I just, and Gabe Rucker for that matter, like the restaurant that they set up was like, it was a killing ground, and like you either make it or you don't. And like I happened to make it, and I attribute pretty much all of my restaurant success and like wine success to my time at Little Bird. That was the biggest one for me. But I was also trying to get into different avenues. And so like Sergio had said, like, I think that like one distributor that we work with needs a sales rep. So like you should reach out and like maybe work as a sales rep. And so I did that. I don't remember who I reached out to or if I ended up ever reaching out to them, but like went to the like Dame was open at the time in Northeast Killingsworth, and they had just opened up their bottle shop. And so I went there for their like opening party, and I met a bunch of like local winemakers, and the gal who was pouring for Irie was this gal named Jonna, who was working for OBM at the time. And so I reached out to her and I was like, OBM was the spot that Sergio had mentioned, and like I'm kind of interested in maybe getting a wine rep job. And she was like, I think that spot got filled, like we're not hiring, but my friend Jeff at Le Cave is looking for someone, because like at the time I think both John and Jeff were like really ramping up wine production and making more wine, and they needed someone who could like actually tend the bar. I was living at 10th in Alberta at the time. I had passed by the spot a million times, knew about it, but was like I never like took the plunge, you know. I never went down the alleyway and flight of stairs. And so she either like gave me his number or set up a time for us, but she was like, you should go and like interview there. So I remember I came down and I sat right where my water bottle is over there, and hell yeah, let's go. Thank you, Rich. That's hospitality. Yeah, we're really flowing now. We're getting into the current era. I felt like I spent a lot longer in Austin than I originally planned, but that is where it all started, so it makes sense. But yeah, I sat down at third seat at the bar. Jeff was working bar along with Matt Buckley, who I think is now I think he might be the winemaker at David Hill, like full on. He was like the assistant winemaker there for a while. Oh yeah, as I was working at Little Bird, I also worked one harvest with Chad Stock when he still had the Minimus label, and Minimus was like really cool to me. It was like the brand that I had heard about in Austin, but they didn't like distribute to there. So like it was just something that I'd heard about, like being kind of an avant-garde-ish project in the Willamette Valley that was like really attractive to me. So I remember getting a bottle of Minimus, like posting it on Instagram, tagging Minimus. He reached out and he was like, "Thank you so much." And I was like, "Can I work harvest with you?" That was while I was still at Little Bird, yeah. Because I remember that was pretty grueling. I was like part-time doing that thing, and then I was coming back and I was working service every other night of the week that I wasn't down in the valley. And that was like such a great experience to learn that I didn't want to get into winemaking, that I was like much more like hospitality side of things. And also my hands were just like ravaged from all the cleaners, chemicals. Not that they were like high intervention winemaking. It was just like the fact of the matter is it's a lot of cleaning and my hands could not take it. And I was just like, this is not for me. I don't want to do it. I've got these porcelain hands that are best for service. So I came in here and the room was just like so vibrant, you know. It was like really, really full. I remember at the time not knowing him, but like Andre, who is like the longest serving member at Urdaneta down the street, the Spanish spot, was definitely sitting at the bar, probably with another coworker. Andre has sent more people to this bar than like anyone on the planet. So special shout outs to him. He's a great guy. And the bar was just full. And I remember like Jeff serving me some of his wine. It was like, I think his Tempranillo or Syrah or something like that. And it was so vibey in here. And it was, it was a little brighter than I normally keep it now. But like, there was such a rocking energy. And like, I will just like, never forget that first time that I came in. And it had been like, I had wanted to come in for a while and didn't. And like, I think timing is everything in life, but also timing is like really important in how you come into the space and enjoy it. And I was kind of like, I kind of get on people when they like, we get a lot of like looky-loos that come in and they're like, wow, this space is really cool. What did it used to be? okay, cool, see you later. And I'm like, you just ruined it for yourself. You ruined that opportunity to come in and sit down for the very first time and have a really transportative experience with wine, and you can't get that back. And I think it doesn't matter for a lot of people, but like, I really do kind of like, I'm unafraid to say that. I'm like, I won't be a dick about it, but I'll just be like, I'll usually just like play it like, oh, the best way to enjoy this space for the first time? Sit down and have a glass. Have a half glass. I don't care. Like, I just want you to experience this, because the likelihood that you come back anytime soon after you do that is just, I'm here all the time. I know that I don't see those people. And I'm like, that's sad to me, because you did come in and I believe you that you thought it was a cool space. But like, you only experienced half of it. Okay, so we talked with Jeff. He was like, come in, we'll do an interview, or like, that was my interview, do a stage. So I was like, okay, cool. I took the menu home, studied every single wine, learned everything. Then I came in a few weeks later for my stage, and I was like, sit back, I'm gonna do this. Because I'd sat here and I'd watched how he did things, I'd watched how he operated, watched how he navigated like talking with guests, for better or for worse. And I was like, I get the service. I get what they're doing. It clicked perfectly for me. I was like, this is kind of like, there are aspects of this that are like the fine dining service without any of the pomp and circumstance. Like, we're not specialing, we're not like, it's not elaborate, but the core tenet is that we're providing table service in a bar, like a bar environment. And I thought that was really cool. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna come in sometime like end of December. And I did my like working interview, and I was like, sit back, I'm gonna do this. And I took every single guest that came in, and I was like, this is this wine, this is that wine. Like, if you're interested in a bottle of something, I recommend like these. Like, I was just really like, I was ready. I came prepared, because I really wanted this job. I really liked it from my like first experience here. And I was like, it's also close to my house. Like, this would be a perfect spot. And I ended up getting the job, but not when I thought I did. I thought I got it then and there. I went on like a vacation. We rented an RV, drove down to what ended up being my in-laws' house in Texas. And I was like, I got this new job. It's a wine bar. It's right down the street from my house. It's super cool. It's a cave. I'm really, really excited. I was working, and I was planning on being here part-time and still working at Little Bird. I wasn't like fully out of there yet. And came back for what I thought was gonna be like my first training shift, worked the whole shift. And then Jeff was like, you're hired. And I was like, what? I really thought that I was hired the last time around, but I'm glad I got the job. And so then there was never really like a training. I just kind of like started at that point. And I was part-time for a little bit, and then decided, Jeff basically offered me to come on full-time here because he was like busy with wine. And I don't think I'd met John until a little bit later too. Jeff was definitely the first person I met. And so when he offered me the full-time job, I was like, you know what, I think it's time. I think it's gonna like make my life a little simpler.
When was that?
This would have been April of 2019. Yeah. And I had a lot of fun. I worked with the guy Matt, who I mentioned, and love that guy. Like, really chaotic energy, but he would like turn the lights down impossibly low, and we had like candlelight, and he would turn up, we would play records back then, and he would turn up the music so loud. And it was like, played a Ministry album. I don't know Ministry, but it was like their early kind of proggy record, and it was like it was so, the service was so jazzy because we were just having fun, and like new people would come in, and it was all table service, and we never really had like a structure of like who would take what, and it was just kind of like all over the place, but it was really fun and really good natured, and so I think people really responded to that. Matt ended up leaving, and I became like the only full-time person here. And then not long into, like, I don't recall how long I worked with Matt, but then that was only like several days a week. And then so it was only really ever one person working at a time, and so I got a lot of like experience talking to literally everybody who came in here, and so I realized that there was like a really special attribute of this bar is kind of the thing that maybe even kept me from coming down for all the time. I was also really broke, and so like the idea of like going down into a wine spot, I was kind of like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. I probably can't afford it, even though I love wine and I work in wine and I'm around it. My liquidity and ability to actually drink wine was like not commensurate with how much I was making at the time and how much like cost of living had been. But I think it takes a really like special person to like walk down an alleyway, walk down a flight of stairs, and come into an unfamiliar space. And so what I learned is that like when those people walked in and I was behind the bar and I would say, hey, what's up? Welcome in. That people were like, I'll buy whatever you want. Like they completely surrendered because it was like they were kind of nervous, and then all of a sudden like someone gave them a welcoming hug of sorts, and I would just like be like, here, you can sit here, I'm gonna take care of you, and like, we doing okay on time? Okay, cool. So yeah, I there was this like complete surrender, it felt like, from the guests. And I felt like for a really, really long time, it was like mostly people who just lived in the neighborhood who didn't really know anything about wine, but just were like, would respond to enthusiasm. And I could basically sell them whatever I liked, which brought me back to like my time at Bufalina, where I was like, I'm just stoked on this right now and I want to share it with you. And then they would be like, this is really good. And I'd be like, I know, it's so good. And we would have that like, just like connection, And then I would meet some industry people, I would say not very many back in those days. But like there were definitely people who knew wine, and then that was interesting too. And so there was like a nice kind of cross section of people who were like here just for like the space being cool and feeling really, really welcome. And then there were the other people who knew stuff, and then I could learn from them, and like felt like I was deepening my sense of community, but I didn't have any say over like what we poured. And that was like a big kind of weird disconnect because I was the one here all the time. So I had no control over the menu. I didn't really have any control over like events. I was merely like kind of a foot soldier, but also like the one who had every interaction with every person. And there was things about like what we did with service that were kind of like, felt like not very hospitable, that I kind of bristled at, and yet like I liked the job, and so I continued to do it. And the pandemic came and this bar closed, and right before the pandemic came, I had some friends who had recently opened up, or I had some friends who had recently opened up a restaurant in Houston. And they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we're opening up this restaurant in Houston. You had experience working with wine in Texas. Like, do you know of anybody who could like help us out? And I just kind of had that moment where I was like, no, but I can. And so I ended up doing a wine program for a restaurant in Houston, Texas for 3 years completely remotely, because I still had connections to like distributors from my time working in Austin, of just being there, being around it and meeting people. And so I was like, this is my opportunity to like make something for myself, because I didn't have that here. I was tasting a lot of wines, and there was some interesting stuff that came through, and then other things were like just pouring like Jeff and John's wines, and the scope was fairly limited. But then I was also like, I was like going to, like, I was buying bottles from like Dame at the time, and like able to try stuff that was like up here that was also down there. And I ended up making a list for this restaurant that was called El Topo that I was really, really proud of. It's no longer that iteration. They closed and reopened under a different concept. Ended up getting like a Michelin Bib Gourmand. Like the head chef just won like James Beard's like best new like rising star chef, best new chef. I can't remember what they call that title, but I can't take any credit for that. But that chef was there when I was doing the wine program, and like we had talked once. I went down to that restaurant once in the 3 years that I did their wine program, and like they were selling virtually no wine, but the list was dope. It was so cool. I mean, the restaurant was like, it was named after the acid western El Topo by Jodorowsky, and I was like really getting into film at the time because I was in the pandemic, and like that was like my intellectual stimulation. And so I was like, this is a psychedelic western. I'm going to make like a wine list that's like half like avant-garde kind of like supernatural wines, and then the other like more going to be like classical moded. But I was like, let's lean into like the psychedelic sort of aspect of this wine program, and I had a lot of fun with it. They sold like so little wine. Like we sell in a couple days what they sold in a month. Like it was just like there was a disconnect there. Like not having someone be there to like do actual training made it just kind of like an object of, you know, it was more of a curio than anything. Like the wine reps would be like, this is the coolest list in Texas, and then no one would, you know, experience it. But that was like my first foray into learning like what it takes to run a wine program, and like definitely having like an aesthetic point of view about the sourcing and how the list looks, how a list reads. And I didn't really get the chance to do that here. I came back after the pandemic. The space grew. We expanded to an outdoor space, which is like a huge like albatross that I'd never really wanted in the first place. The bar started taking reservations. It was a mess. Like the candles got replaced with like battery operated candles. It just became really like, I felt like tacky over like upon reopening. And I managed here for like another year and a half before I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm bored by it. I don't like managing this space. Like we grew the staff by like 3 times from pre-pandemic to the post-pandemic time, and it just was like, it's time to be done. Like I miss food too much, and I need to get back into it. So at that point, I reached out to Jane, who was the owner of Dame, to see if they had a position for me. I started working there. They had a lot of wine kind of like backed up, and so like I helped out with like picking the by the glass wines for them, which was cool because like I didn't have any say over like what we poured here, and I felt like I had learned some things from my time working that El Topo job. Learned about like, you know, cost of goods a little bit. And then I was also working at Davenport a little bit, which was an awesome experience. Again, like kind of getting back into like with Dame, it was a lot of like kind of the new wave of like French modern like natural wine, and Davenport was like a lot of classics again, where more international, not just French focused. And so that was kind of like cool to dip my toes in there. I was working maybe 2 days a week at Davenport. I might have been working all 3 jobs at the time. Like I had a tendency of doing that, especially in Austin. But that was a cool time for sure. That would have been in like the fall of 2022. And around that time, like Dame was taking people to Italy every year, so I got to go to Puglia. Accidentally rented a manual car rental, not having ever learned how to drive stick. I learned how to drive stick shift in Italy, in southern Italy, which was really cool. And then I went to Sicily as part of like a belated honeymoon with my wife at the time, and knew to rent an automatic car. But it was funny because it was like we were staying in Catania in eastern Sicily, and it was like a long like Mercedes wagon that they lent us, and everything's so small there, so like it was impossible to find parking anywhere. And driving in Catania is a trip because everyone's just like bumper to bumper, car to car. It's like you have to be really locked in and dialed in, and that was actually kind of cool. I kind of prefer that to like everyone texting and driving when they're here. So like, I don't know, paying attention is important. This was the first time I've ever been to Europe, and this was my first time, like, I didn't see any wineries in southern Italy, but I did meet with 4 winemakers in Sicily, kind of all over. One was in Alcamo, one was in Vittoria, and then a couple were on Mount Etna. And that was like the first time that I really experienced like tasting wine with an old world producer and realizing that like so much of their personality could be tasted in the wine. Like the first guy was like really grumpy. Like we got lost. It like took us a long time getting there. The first thing he said was, "You're late." He was also like one who was kind of like stoic, and his wife, when we reached out, the wife like responded like, "Alessandro will see you." And it was just kind of like, this guy was like, he was kind of intense, but like he really opened up after like 4 bottles of wine together, and then was like very cool and like connected us with another Etna producer who he was friends with, who could not be more different. Like that guy was like 2 hours late to our tasting or something like that, rolled up with like a DJ from Ibiza and like 2 pit bulls in the back of the car, and he was wild, and his wines were super wild too. And so it was super funny to like see these in contrast. I went to see I Veneri and tasted with Simone Foti, the son, one of Salvo's 2 sons, and he was just like so kind and soft-spoken and sweet and generous, and I felt like the wines really represented that too. And it was just like a moment where I was like, okay, like wine is not just a beverage that tastes good and is interesting. It is like an extension of the winemaker's hand. And that was like revolutionary to me. Like I had never really felt that connected or close to any of that. Not when I was working harvest, not tasting wines from people that I don't know. And so that was a very cool moment for me. After coming back to Italy, or from Italy, I worked there for, actually that might have been fall of 2021, because I think I worked there for a year after that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm ready to like move on from like serving to being like a restaurant manager. Got a job at Arden as their front of house manager. I worked there for a year. I wasn't really involved with the wine program. I would occasionally sit in on tastings, but I was mostly just like there to run service and like get the front of house operating at a high level. I mean, I remember training them to like really start selling like the chef's prefix and like pairings, and like really jumped up our like the check averages there. So like I was starting to learn how to be like a good restaurant manager, like with regards to like economics, starting to think about like the bottom line. After that was when I was kind of at a loss of like what to do next, and I was kind of like, man, I don't know if I want to do management anymore. It was really stressful. Like managing is really hard, and like when you're managing people, like there's a lot of external stuff that like creeps into the picture, and you have to kind of navigate that. And so I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But then I was just kind of like looking at Poach to see what was next, and interviewed at a couple spots, and there's a spot on Mississippi called Tartuca that was hiring for a general manager and wine director. And I was kind of like, you know what? I've never I've never done wine directing for a place that I've physically worked. So I think, and I had been to Tartuca once, and they served pizza at the time, and so it like reminded me a lot of Bufalina. And I was like, I think I can make this be the Bufalina of Portland. There's no other restaurant like that, and that restaurant was so important to me. So I really want to like see if I can do that. And I was there for a year and a half. I saw 3 executive chef changes where I was like holding on each time, and like I became the one who was kind of responsible for keeping like the kitchen staff involved and like sticking around, and it was just way too much. My list was awesome. Like I decided to go all Italian, and that was largely because like I had felt like I'd come from a French background after Little Bird, after Bufalina for that matter, which was like so French centric, even though it was an Italian restaurant. And so I was like, I'm gonna create a list with a point of view here. I also tried to make it like a champagne destination. I really learned a lot from that job and what not to do. I back up a little bit. While I was working at Arden, I like almost took out a lease on the old Ambonnet space to open up like a champagne bar there, which had like gone through several owners, failed every time. I don't know why. I thought I would like be able to do it differently. But we had some mutual friends who were friends with Nina from Sunflower Sake, and she was the one who was like, you should do it. Like, there's an opening, do it. And I was like super arrogant at the time, and I was like, I think I can do this. I've worked around it enough that I think I can do it. And Tartuca taught me that I was not ready, and I didn't know that until later, but I'm thankful for that. I definitely like over-ordered wine. I ordered wine at a clip that we could not sell it, and there was not really storage. So then I ended up trying to like store wines at my house, store wines at a sister restaurant. Like it was a problem, and like it had gotten to a point before I got called out on it that I was like, I was in too deep, So that is something that has like definitely informed how I do stuff here. After getting very, very burnt out working as a restaurant general manager, it was a much more like, I had some burnout from Arden. Like this was like more burnout than I can possibly explain. Just like basically owning a restaurant without the final say in a lot of things, but being on the hook and thinking about it all the time. Like I was going bald, like I was just like so stressed. So then I was like, I'm really not getting back into a management job after leaving this. I left when an opportunity came up at Le Pigeon, which is somewhere that I had wanted to work ever since like 2015, when my buddy who got me the job at Little Bird, I had come up to visit him in like 2015, and I ate at Le Pigeon, did like a 5-course tasting menu with the wine pairings. They did a 7-course tasting menu at the time. I could not believe that because I was the fullest I'd ever been off of 5 courses and felt sick. But it was like such a cool experience and like such a rock and roll vibe, and just, yeah, it's so cool. The food was so creative. And so when a serving position opened up at Le Pigeon, I was like, I've wanted to work there pretty much my whole career. I'm gonna go for it. I staged there, and I did the kind of like approach that had worked well for me here, where it's like, I think I know the culture, I know how things work here, put me in. Like I will do all the wine pairings for this party right here. I did it, and it was like, 5-6 courses, all with wine pairings, and I talked about it like I had worked there my whole life, and ended up getting the job offer. Definitely there was a learning curve there. I was like not great at it at first, but once I learned like the rhythms of how everything works, I started getting really good at it. And it was right around the time that I was getting really, really good that John House reached out to me, and he said, hey man, like been thinking about you, and I've got an idea that I want to run past you. Let's meet up. And like, we haven't really talked about John much. Like, I had a really good relationship with John, but I didn't see him very much in my time here. And so every so often we would check in, and I always was like, this guy's just really cool. You know, like, kind of wish he was here more often, but I get that he's a busy winemaker. He's a father. He owns a Spanish and Portuguese wine importing portfolio. I'll take what I can get. So this was September of last year, 2025? Yeah.
Sounds right.
Sounds right. And we met up at Bar Martina, which I think is an excellent spot. Sister wine bar to Luce. And I showed up, and he had a bottle of like Vinegut Canole Rosé waiting, and I was like, that's a classy move. Like, he's gonna ask something of me. And he was like, Barnina's not doing well. And Barnina was like the 18-month intermittent concept that went into the spot after John and Jeff dissolved their business partnership, and Jeff went on to open L'Orange, and John stayed here. I think he just kind of wanted a spiritual reset, and so he was like, I love Nina Simone. I named my daughter after Nina Simone, so I'm just going to call it Barnina. To me, like, I get it. I think that's a like sweet reason for doing it, but it was like at a time that like there was Bar Diane. I think Bar Martina was in the works. There was just like bar insert woman's name here, and it just like to me was like, this is Le Cave. Like it is Le Cave means a cellar. It's a physical space that looks like a cave. Like Le Cave is just like what it should be called, short of just calling it the cave. And so he was just like, Barnina's not doing well, and I need someone who can run the bar. And you did it for years and never got the credit for it. And would you be interested? And in the back of my mind, I was like, yes. I've wanted to own a wine bar forever. But I was like, I really like working at Le Pigeon. I like feel really good when I'm working there. I feel like it's a job that's like really designed for my strengths. It's chill. I work like 35 hours a week, and I make more money than I've ever made as a restaurant manager. Like, I have to think about it. And then I just like, I spent a couple months like really, really thinking about it, and eventually was like, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Like, a bar that I already know how to work, and getting a really, really generous like sweat equity sort of deal. Like, if I pass on this, I will regret it, even if things are really, really chill right now and I'm happy chilling. So then he was like trying to rush it and wanted to open up and like rebrand, or like, my idea to bring the name back and to drop the Barnina moniker and go back to being Le Cave, but changing it, updating it slightly by calling it Le Cave Wine Bar. He wanted to do it like in the Christmas time, and I was like, look, like the holiday season's always good. Like, Barnina can like probably do more in sales during the Christmas time without any sort of added help. Let's like come back strong and like rebrand and open in January when like everything's dead. And that way we'll have like time to work out the kinks. And so yeah, we did it. We did some light renovations, new tables, new chairs.
The moss.
The moss is back. The art that was on the wall that was just kind of mishmash, like not cohesive, uncohesive, just not cohesive. I pulled it all off because I like the way that the concrete looks. I think that this is a space that should lean into the fact that it's very cave-like. But along with the rebrand, I had internalized all of these like ideas for like what we could do with the space. And so when I knew, like I remember giving my notice at Le Pigeon on Halloween, and then spending like the next few months like knowing that I was going to take over, going to a lot of different wine bars around town, and being an undercover boss here, and coming in and being like, what's up? Like, how's it going? And I recall a very, very important visit was like the last visit that I did before the bar closed, and then I came in and like updated things. I came in with my friends Eli and Perry. You know them?
I interviewed them last week, in fact.
No kidding. Okay, that's great. I love them. And they called up Austin Bridges, and Austin Bridges came in too, and I had never met Austin before. And we sat here. I think the table was oriented differently, and it was a different table. And we looked at the list, and there was nothing that any of us wanted to drink. It was like, the by the glass wines were really odd. Like there was a lot of sameness to a lot of the wines. And then the bottle list was all very like kind of classic food wines. And none of it seemed like the right wine for the context that we were like, we're industry people who like cool stuff and we don't want to get food because there's like grilled cheese sandwiches here or whatever. Like I just want to like sip wine in a space. And so we asked, who is one of my current bartenders, Nathan, like, how often do people order bottles? And he was like, never. And I was like, well, why do you only have like 6 by the glass options? And he was like, well, we don't like want to waste anything. We don't want to like open anything. Like things just go to waste when we have too many options. And I was like, okay, that is really interesting, but like the options that you have are like, you have like 2 Merlots. Out of the 3 red wines are like 2 of them are Merlot based. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And so we ended up settling on just like a bottle of Muscadet, which was good. And it was like good price and satisfying for us 4 like wine professionals. And it was really Austin who kind of like planted the seed in me. And he was like, you know, when I used to be the wine director at DOC, we didn't really have a by the glass list. I kind of just would ask people what they wanted to drink and then I would open it. And that really like lit a fire in me and got me really thinking. And I was like, okay, that kind of is perfect because I've worked here for so long to know that most people come in and they're just like, I just want a mystery pour. Like they're not like, well, let me tell you exactly what I want. They have been like pretty agreeable to order whatever I want them to order. And so I got this like unique opportunity where I was like, okay, I remember also going to Bar Diane, a friend of mine there, Megan, who does the buying. She had like a by the glass list and her bottle list. And I was looking at the bottle list and I was there by myself. And I was like, this bottle list is really good. How often do people order from it? And she's like, never. And also Bar Diane was like, I think falling a little bit victim, or not victim, but things just change. And there's a lot of places that I think opened with the intention of being a wine bar that become restaurants. And they take reservations, and then the focus changes from being like about the wine to being about the food. And that kind of like also got into my head a little bit that I was like, maybe I need to make this a food spot. Like I also did the social media for Tartuca, and like I would post some really cool, like this is the wine of the day that we're pouring, and it would get like 8 likes. Then I would post a new dish and it would get like 200. And I'm like, I don't think people care about wine. Like, I think that like the average person is drawn in by the food, and the wine is kind of like accessory to that. And then it becomes important about like service and vibe and all that stuff. And so talking to Austin and him like introducing this idea, which I was like, I had some like clarifying questions, but like really kind of just like, I was just like, that's a cool idea. And if I like limit the number of things that I have open, becomes like I can pour cooler wines, and because I don't have waste, I can price them more like accessibly. And it wasn't until like John was like, have you heard of a Vesta board? Like, I was like, no. And he's like, they look like an old European train station. It's controlled by an app, but that's what we basically have on the board. And he's like, or up on the wall. He was like, I want one, but I don't know what I would use it for. And I was like, John, I've been kicking around this idea about having a changing wine list that the glass pours change constantly throughout the night. And he was like, I'm gonna fucking buy it. Like, and it was like a pragmatic thing that has had so many unintended positive consequences or positive results. And so I spent like the kind of like the winter break when like Pigeon was closed for their annual winter break, and I was done there at that point, and then waiting to open this, that I was like, I'm going to create a menu and program that supports this idea. And so that's what I have like here. It's a wine list that is presented like a bottle list, but there is no glass pours, and there's no like glass pour pricing. But how it works is that we have like 5 spots on that board, and what we do is anyone who comes in, if there's a spot on the board that says like open wine spot, whoever needs a glass of something can order anything off of this list. This is just a representation of all the bottles I have available in this tiny bar. And so I tell them, you can pick anything out on this list and enjoy it by the glass for a quarter of the bottle list price. And then that becomes the next glass pour until that bottle gets finished. And that eliminated the problem of having a glass program and a buy the bottle list, and a bottle list that no one gets really engaged with. And that was something that I learned with Tartuca. Like, I ended up buying a bunch of stuff that did really, really well by the glass, and it was stuff that was good with the food, and was like good for the business. Like, I made good margins on it or whatever. But if my friends came in and they were like, I want a glass of something, I wasn't really excited about any of it. And this allowed me to be like, everything that and also like with Tartuca, I was like, if ever there was one of my servers was like, this table wants to talk about the bottle list, I'd be like, everybody hold the door. I'm gonna be there for a while because I love this shit. And I never get to like talk about my beautiful list that's 10 pages long and no one buys from it. So I was like, of course, like, how can I make a business model that feels like I'm talking about the wine list or the bottle list every time someone wants to get a glass of something? And like, by taking away the pressure of someone getting a full bottle of something, people have gotten really open-minded about trying new things. And like, I knew that was the case about this bar anyway, that everybody was open-minded. And like, for the few people that are like very particular, then they have a lot more options to choose from. And so like, my job is to like really build like a balanced list that has a lot of variety at like different price points, but to have it all like, you know, have it all be accessible, have it all be like bottles that I believe in, wines that I think are really cool. And like, a big focus here is that like, we have a very, very small food program because we do not have a lot of space and I don't have a chef. Like, I get all my food from Cowbell, and it's all like imported European artisanal cured things that is like really easy. The most cooking we do is heating up like the little tea baguette that we get. And so I needed to make sure that the food was not the draw. Like, wine has to be the draw. And if wine has to be the draw, then the wine has to be better than everyone else's by the glass pours. And so because we've eliminated waste, because we're rigid about, if you come in and there's 5 wines up on that board, you're gonna drink one of those wines. Or you can get a mystery pour. Like, that's your way out, whatever. But all the wines have to stand on their own, you know, without food. And they have to be energizing, they have to be refreshing, but they have to be complex. And so I've been able to tap into a higher price point, which has been great because the cost of wine in the industry is going up, up, and up. And this allows me to have a sustainable business model and sustainable like wine cost while pouring nicer things than your average restaurant will pour by the glass. And sometimes sometimes it cuts into my margin because I want to pour stuff that I think my wine geek friends will get really into and charge less for them than other places will. And for me, it's like, that's part of the culture. That's like giving back to the culture. And I think at this point, like, I can get really, really scattershot because I'm excited about a lot of stuff that's going on here and kind of like the decisions that I've made to update this bar, but all informed by years of working here and not really having a voice to do so. And so like, I wanted to make this an industry spot. And like, the first thing that I thought about was how when I worked in restaurants, there was no place in Portland to go drink wine after I got off of my shift. And so like, number one imperative was like, we stay open till midnight, no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, and we don't last call. So like, if the party's really going and it's, you know, 12 o'clock at night and that's when our posted hours are, but like the room's full and people are like drinking, like, we'll keep serving. I have 2 bartenders who are like super down with that ethos. And we never close early. It can be dead at like 11, and I will make sure that we stick it out because if the worst thing that can happen is if somebody tries coming here and they're excited and they get here and it's like, oh, we've closed early. Portland can be kind of reactive in that way and be like, well, there's no business for it, so like we're not going to stay open later. And for me, the approach was, I have a pretty relatively low overhead because I don't have a kitchen staff to pay. I just have like 1 hourly bartender at a time, or maybe it's just me. We are going to be open later than any other wine serving spot in town. And we are open later than every single wine serving spot by 2 hours. So again, because I'm a community guy and like love this industry, my goal is that like people are having a great time with Mark at Heavenly Creatures, one of my favorite guys in town. And they are having such a good time that when they leave at 10, when Heavenly Creatures closes, they're like, I want to keep hanging out with you. I love you. Where can we go? They look it up, there is one spot, and it's us. But no one has a bad time when they're here. And so it is just like, it's playing the long game. And like, for a while, like, I felt like there was a lot of interest in like the late night, and then there was like not as much interest in the late night, but we stayed the course. And like last night, our busiest window of time on a Wednesday was 10 to midnight. And like that feels so good and so validating that we're like, we are an industry spot. This is a spot where restaurant servers can come, kitchen staff, if they're like into wine or curious about it, like they can come. If you've been out hanging out at any other place in town, which I love to go, like I don't work service on Thursday nights, and every Thursday I go to another like wine spot, whether it's a restaurant or a bar, because I'm like, I care about the community and I don't want to compete. I want to be an addition. I want to supplement what is severely lacking in this town. And you know, like I live in North Portland, so when I leave here at night, I drive down Alberta Street and I'll see Donnie Vegas, the like dive bar over on 12th and Alberta, like packed at like 1:30. So there's a demand for it. Like it's just that like I think wine spots think differently or they don't. So basically like I've really wanted to take the spot and like kind of just blow it up in like a like what are other wine spots doing? I'm gonna do it differently. I want this more to feel like a neighborhood bar, and the fact that we're getting a lot of like people treating it as a destination is amazing. It was not really my intention. I will take anybody, of course, but like we're open later. I don't do like a wine club. I don't really want to do a newsletter because, you know, I get like, John will forward me like inquiries that pass through his like email, and every single one of those inquiries, when there's a field that says like, can send marketing info, it says false. And so I'm like, I'm here all the time running service, trying to run a bar. The last thing that I want to do is like write a newsletter that I think people are just going to spam. To me, I'm like, I want to flip the script. I want to do what no one else is doing. Let's just be a good bar. Let's be a like spot where like, it's really nice when you say like you got a babysitter to come here and like treat it as a date night. I kind of just want you to come in every day. Like come in for 15 minutes, just say hi. Like that's when I start to feel like there's like so much more community, you know, with the feeling like wine doesn't have to be the special occasion thing. Like just the coming in is like occasion enough. It should just be part of your like daily routine. And especially like now with this like this model, another one of like the unintended like results that has been so positive is that like it's created a opportunity for people in close proximity to strike up a conversation with one another in a very natural way. Like I always find it to be pretty cringe when you like pass by a spot that says like community on like the reader board, but there's no like infrastructural like avenue for that community. It's just kind of like we hope for the best. We hope you find community here. But here it's like people will sit at the bar and they'll be like, "Ooh, I can pick the next wine that we open. I want to pick this." And then like they try it and then they're like, "That's really good." And their neighbor's like, "What'd you drink it?" And then the neighbor's like, "I'll get that too." And then all of a sudden everyone at the bar is drinking the same thing. And then they start talking with one another. And it's like, it just feels like people leave here having more of a like sense of belonging than I think this place has ever had before. And I'm really, really proud of that. Taking reservations here was something that they did post-pandemic, which was the worst thing the bar could ever have done and had drastic consequences as far as I'm concerned, because this place was always the coolest when people would hang out here for like 5 hours, end up drinking like a whole bottle of wine each, but over a span of a long time and not really realize it. And it was just like everyone was like able to linger and chill. And once you introduce reservations to the mix, also we were like not a restaurant. Like it was just a weird sort of like marketing thing because people were scared to go leave the house after the pandemic. So I get it. But it lasted too long. The reservation era lasted too long. This is a neighborhood bar that people should just be able to walk into. And I always tell people, if you come in and you want to be here, doesn't matter if there's spaces. I will serve you anywhere. We got that standing bar. If you want to be in the bathroom, I don't care. Go outside, like stand, I don't care. I just want you here and you want to be here. So like, I'm going to make it happen for you. And reservations made people think that they needed a spot. Reservations also made people like, there was a time limit to everyone's enjoyment of the space. And I also, on that very, very fortuitous trip here with Eli, Perry, and Austin, we were sitting at a table over there. There was 2 long tables and no one was like wanting to sit communally. We had been sitting at that table and got moved because there was like a 6-person reservation. And that was fine, like I totally get it. We moved to this spot and then that party of 6 came in and they ordered 1 half glass each and then they left. And so I was just like, why are y'all taking reservations still? Like this is stupid. Like we are the walk-ins who had a bottle of wine and maybe some glasses too. I don't actually remember, but like the reservations were not doing anyone any good. And it was in fact having a very harmful, like long-term effect. And I think getting rid of the reservations altogether right away, first order of business, has increased like just the number of people popping in.
Where does it go from here?
Just getting better, getting better at it. And I think like we're 7 months in now and really honing our operations. And I think for the first 7 months or so, like we're busier than Barnina ever was, but we're still not full most nights. And like the nights that we're full, it's like, you know, Fridays or Saturdays. I would love to figure out how to drum up weekday business so that it is like really full. Like in the past, I worked here like by myself and it could get a little hairy when it got really, really full. Not in a way that I didn't like. I kind of liked the like rock and roll aspect of it all. I mean, yeah, I play vinyl only, and again, like trying to like make the space feel really, really physical and intimate, and along with like this idea that every bottle of wine that we open, like we play it through. Like we don't open up anything else until that bottle gets finished. The same principle applies to like putting on a full album. And you know, I like the moments where we stop and flip the record, or it's time to pick a new one, and I can really assess the energy of the room. And I think like 80s rock and roll and like 2000s hip hop sounds really good in here. Of like, again, this is kind of going back to this idea of like trying to do everything that differently than anyone else is doing. And I think like removing preciousness from the space and the style of service and just making it feel really fun and accessible is something that is really important to our success here. And I think just, yeah, getting the name out again. I mean, I still feel like every day I have people who are like, wait, y'all are back? And it's like, well, yeah, it's been 7 months, and even my homie Rich knew about it.
Even this guy.
Even
he's old and doesn't live in Portland.
He's really tapped, but you're really tapped in. You're really tapped into the zone, which is cool. I just am surprised by the number of people who are still like, I had no idea, you know, and so I think getting those people, but I'm a big fan of organic growth, and like, I'm not trying to force anything. I think I'm in a unique position where like, as like the operating owner, like I know how things feel on a day-to-day basis, and everything kind of runs through the prism of my intuition and just like vibes-based understanding of how things work here. And like, so like I can have John come in and be like, John will say like, I think we should do this, this, and this, and I can be like, respectfully, no, no, and no, and these are the reasons why. I don't think that that's going to be actually good for our business. I think continuing to show up and doing better and better each day is what gets us the long-term sustainable business with people who actually care about what we're doing. And I think the sales reflect a steady growth and appreciation of this bar. Like since I took over in January, we have gotten busier every single month with a slight dip in June. And then I think May or July were like our busiest months, and more than doubling the sales of Barnina in a single month. And that's based off of fewer service days. We're closed Mondays. They were open 7 days a week. And so I think my decision to open and stay open later, but work fewer days, has been like the best thing for this bar. And like, it's become an industry spot, but it's also become like the neighborhood. Like, we wanted to get out of our house and like have wine, and there's nowhere to go. And I love that because like, I'm proud of what we're doing. And so like, I know that if I get people in the door, they'll probably come back. I don't ever really have negative interactions here. Everyone's pretty like cool and open-minded.
You've had to come down the stairs.
Exactly.
They're already in.
They've surrendered.
They're in the barrel.
They're in the barrel. There's no turning back. And so as long as like we're nice and like patient, that's another thing. Like a big reason why I wanted to like do this list the way that I did and make it look like a bottle list and not like an overwhelming document, but there's quite a few options on here. I feel like people don't know, like the average consumer does not know that the bottle list is where all the good values are and where all the good shit is. And I wanted to give people like the opportunity to practice in a non-restaurant setting what looking at a restaurant list is like. Because in a restaurant, you have to think about food. You have to be timely because you probably have like a reservation behind you if the restaurant is like doing well. And like the economics of a restaurant are like, we have to turn and burn, and hospitality is kind of like, feels kind of fake in a way, like not in a bad sense, but just by kind of necessity. Like, I'm trying to give like old world like hospitality here, where it's like, I'm not trying to turn your table. In fact, if the room's not full and like you're done drinking, I'm probably gonna avoid you so that like you have to stay here longer so that the room feels more vibrant. I will bring you your check when you ask for it, you know? And what's up, y'all?
Hey, what's up, dog?
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, it's like, it's dark.
It's one of my bartenders, Pierre, who's
Pierre.
weathered the storm and gone through the changes. He started here when I was like managing back in like the post-pandemic era, but before Barnina. So he and Nathan also started. So they've stuck it out, and now we're under like this new regime, and I think liking it. What's next? I mean, yeah, I think just like truthfully, like trying to find a more of a work-life balance where I have a tendency to just work, and I put a lot of like self-importance or like my personal meaning into my work, and then I sort of become resentful that I've done that, and I've burnt out in other jobs before, and I don't want to burn out in this one, and I can feel it sometimes. Like, there are days where like I really am grinding to like do a bunch of events with like distributors. I do monthly events with the record store that I buy most of my records for, because I wanted to like bring in a whole new avenue of people who are like maybe not like wine people, but come into the space and then feel Like they were like, this is really cool. And like I'm trying to always like dispel this idea that you have to be a wine person to come here. I want everybody to come here. Everybody can have a good time here, because when I purchase wines for the list, my first criteria is it delicious? Everything else falls into place, you know, when you approach it that way. So like, I don't know, I rarely have anybody like think that a wine that I think is delicious is not good. So that's like part of the approach, you know, like, and so if I can get people from different avenues into the bar, then it grows at a much, you know, higher pace, I would say. But if you're only focusing on like wine people, then there's a lot of like competition in town, and not from like we're butting heads. It's just like there's an oversaturation, and there's a lot of good spots too. And so it's like people have a wealth of choices of places to go, and so like we have to be different. And I think that like I've really wanted to be very intentional about being like, this is a wine bar. The draw is wine. Food is not the draw. This is like priced very as low as I can go. I just want people, if they need food, to like have something to snack on. It's kind of this like, I had a very cool interaction in Italy, small town Italy, where like my group of like 4 American friends who were looking haggard after like jet lag and being like tired of being in a new place. Like we went into a bar and the bartender like saw us, served us some drinks, and then left, and then came back with like, it's the cured meat that it's like bologna. It's like Italian bologna and pistachio, mortadella. Brought us mortadella sandwiches just for free, because she was like, they're struggling. And like, I can't do that. I can't give out things for free. This is a different world we live in, but I can charge very little for it, you know? And that was really the intention behind the food program. Just like if people need something, like make sure that they feel taken care of, but wine is the draw. I also like, there are very few places that call themselves wine bars that actually have bar seating, which is very strange to me. I can only think of 2, but I hope there are more. Division Wines, which is like, you know, classic. Like they're operating at a high level and very popular, and have been doing it for a while. And then like Nil Wine Bar attached to Ardor. Those are the only 2 places in town I can think of that actually have bar seating that also are not a restaurant. Like there's a lot of like bar seating in a wine bar cum restaurant, but here we're like, most people, like 95% of our sales is wine, and food is like 5%, you know? And so I think just like continuing to improve the list, you know, and like make sure that everyone feels really taken care of. Like hospitality is just everything for me. I think people like truly come back for that. The wine is like maybe the draw, but what people really fall in love with here is that they feel taken care of in ways that like other places don't make that effort to make people feel really welcome.
All right, one last question for you. You get to the end of your time at Le Cave, you're looking back, what will have made this a success?
I think really all the people who have enjoyed this bar and enjoyed the space and what I was able to do for it. I think I'm really proud of the fact that like this spot is now full of both wine professionals and wine enthusiasts, or people who are just, they like it here. You know, like you don't need to be anything to come here. And the fact that there's now such like a new energy and new life in it, and like all of my friends are excited about it. I'm meeting people all over the place that I don't know that have heard about this and have heard that it's cool. And that's what I'm proud of. Like, I think that like I righted a ship, you know, like I had made a lot of mistakes in various jobs up until this point, and learned from those mistakes and came in and was able to affect change in a really positive way in a really quick timetable. And like that I'm really proud of. I don't think anyone else could have done it except for me. And so like the fact that like John took a gamble on me and was like, I think you're ready, do it. And I was able to do it because I was paying attention and I wasn't like my way or the highway. And I listened to people, and I just think that I knew what this space could be. And it was not performing that way. And like the closest I think it ever was like pre-pandemic. And even still, there were certain things that I was like, I don't really like that aspect of things. And so then I was able to reflect on that and be like, these are all the things that we're changing. I'm very confident that it's going to go well. Now I just have to like prove it. And I was able to prove it like right away. Seriously, like no one's having a bad time, which is so cool. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm proud of. Does that answer the question?
Sure.
Okay.
That's the story.
I kind of forget what the question was in that case.
I only asked a couple, so they didn't. Yeah, that's great. No, all the questions I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't talk about that needs to be talked about?
Man, I'll probably think of something in the aftermath of this all. No, not really.
We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm going to let you off the hook. Thank you.